In addition to differential reinforcement, your textbook describes different exemplary reinforcement-based interventions. Reinforcement plays a central role in the most successful interventions for individuals with ASD. Social stories and social articles are a system that Carol Gray developed as a technique for teaching social skills for children and adults. The approach includes reinforcement by ensuring that at least every other story or article delivers a social reinforcer, and 50% of the stories are affirmation stories. On this page, you will have some more access to sample stories and ideas to incorporate social stories to provide opportunities to reinforce students with autism. Red and Green Choices by Green Irene emphasize the importance of establishing behavior trust, shaping, practice, and establishing criteria for earning a reinforcer. You'll read later about T-charts, and I see this as a version of a T-chart where you make a T and you have opposite items. So we have our yes or green choices and no or red choices. So it indicates the behaviors of the expectation, and it indicates the reinforcer for making that choice. So this is a nice idea for our students to keep handy. It's visual, and it can help them incorporate individual behaviors that they are working on. There's also a little video demonstration of working with a student using the Red and Green Choices alert program in this page. And the third suggestion is the Way to A. And the Way to A is similar to a social story and Red and Green Choices. So it is a laminated book for students to write in with a wipe-off marker so they can identify their goal and their behaviors that will get them to an A, which is green, and not the red. So it's designed to specifically address aggression and tantrums, but it's in a story form and visual using the red and the green. The effectiveness of reinforcement for addressing behavior concerns for individuals on the autism spectrum is very well established. Review of the literature indicates behavior intervention programs deliver reinforcers for positive behaviors can minimize the problem behaviors without always resulting in resorting to punishment. For students with obsessive interests, the differential reinforcement of other behaviors can effectively reduce inappropriate behaviors. So you would identify a certain amount of time that the student can go successfully without engaging in an inappropriate behavior, and you make that your starting point. And if the student meets the goal of not engaging in the inappropriate behavior during that time period, perhaps 2 minutes, perhaps 10 minutes, then they would receive reinforcement and the timer would begin again. This way we can decrease negative behaviors without the side effects of punishment by focusing on alternative behaviors. And of course, token systems were established and research-based back in the 1970s. I'm going to post an article for you from Intervention in School and Clinic to describe how to incorporate a token economy into programs for students with autism spectrum disorder. But I think we all get the idea of token reinforcements, establishing expectations in the classroom, establishing how to earn the tokens, how much of the behavior would earn a token, and then establishing an exchange rate. There are details to consider when establishing your exchange rate of the tokens, and as well as the student would need to learn to identify that the tokens represent something that they are working toward and have the ability for delayed reinforcement. So, reinforcer is something that increases the likelihood of a behavior occurring. It can increase both desired behaviors and undesired behaviors. So if a student is engaging in a behavior you don't like, consider the ABCs, the antecedent, behavior, and consequence, to determine what the student is achieving by engaging in the behavior. And you must stop allowing them to achieve that. So if the student tantrums in the grocery store and always gets taken out of the grocery store, I would imagine this student is tantruming to get taken out of the grocery store. Okay? Maybe it's a sensory overload that the student is trying to avoid. Or maybe the student has something preferred that he or she would rather be doing. But we need to think about changing the consequences, start reinforcing the desired behaviors or the incompatible behaviors, and not allowing the student to achieve the desired consequence from the interfering behavior. We need to plan that. So we need to systematically use our assessments, our functional behavior assessment, and also consider the underlying characteristics of the student to know what those antecedents might be that we can also adjust. Now there is a little bit more to consider when we're using reinforcements. First, you must identify reinforcers for the student. Of course, there are primary reinforcements such as food and water, and we can use that if the student will work for it. But of course, we can't limit that. So we will also want to teach the student other reinforcers or pair with other reinforcements. Activity reinforcers, certainly there are some things that the student would like to earn time to do. You saw in the video with differential reinforcement, the students working to see videos and eat the popcorn. So as that is paired, students learn the secondary reinforcer of the video will be powerful. And again, we pair social reinforcers. Not all students see social reinforcers and read them as being something they want to work for. So we pair it with those things we do know they'll work for, and they will eventually come to find social reinforcement as indeed reinforcement. Toys and games, as well as tokens. If the student can understand that the token signal reinforcer will be delivered later and have the ability for delayed reinforcement, it's a good system that can take less time than having to give reinforcement continuously. Additionally, reinforcement may change. So if a student is normally reinforced by popcorn but just came back from lunch, it may not be a time when popcorn is reinforcing. Or if the student is reinforced by getting to play on recess and they come back from recess, recess may no longer be reinforcing. However, having some water could be reinforcing, or having some quiet time might be reinforcing. So that's why reinforcement menu is always a good option, so that with the wavering motivations for different reinforcers, the student can choose what he or she would like to work for. Additionally, we have to consider the schedule of reinforcement. We don't want to have to commit ourselves to giving continuous schedule of reinforcement every time the student engages in a desired behavior that he or she can achieve reinforcement, something tangible, something time-wise, like playing a video game. So we plan a schedule of reinforcement. So at first, we want the students to see that reinforcement is available. When we're teaching new skills, we'll reinforce continuously. But once the student has achieved and learned the skill, we want to reduce the number of times the student has to engage in the behavior to earn a reinforcer, or the amount of time the student has to go without engaging in interfering behaviors to earn a reinforcer. So we gradually thin that schedule, requiring that they wait longer or engage in the new behavior more before earning that reinforcement. This is a diagram, but I also have an enrichment video to explain schedules of reinforcement further, for those of you that are interested in learning how to ensure the students are not reliant on continuous reinforcement. And lastly, we have guidelines for reinforcement. We want to make sure that the reinforcement is contingent upon appropriate behavior. We pair material reinforcers with those social reinforcers so that they will learn the praise and the hug, perhaps, is reinforcing. By pairing, we can start to build that. We want to take advantage of natural reinforcers to increase desired behaviors. So, you know, if the student is thirsty, they'll ask for the water. So we can work on teaching students to communicate their needs, and the natural reinforcer would be to get what it is they're asking for. We want to take advantage of preferred activity, and value of the reinforcer may change over time. So think about having that reinforcer menu. And that is the end of the presentation here on reinforcement.